Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Wednesday morning, we are talking before
Dicey.
Joe Biden's,
do this.
technically speaking, not State of the Union. They don't call it State of the Union in your first year. It's a joint address to Congress, but it serves the same sort of function. And I think, unless something gets changed on my end, I think we both have assignments.
Yes.
To write about the speech tonight.
Yes.
Well, some dueling takes for you in the morning.
So
I don't know what you. I'm excited for this. I'm actually looking forward to this speech.
You're a nerd, but maybe you can psych me up for this.
I've always liked State of the Unions. I had my rule that I wouldn't watch Trump live. And so I didn't watch any of the Trump State of the Unions live. So I actually have not watched one in 4 years. I guess 5 years. So
wow.
I'm excited to get kind of back in the habit of watching historic events. But more importantly, I of all the sort of pomp and circumstance kind of things, I think State of the Unions do matter. I don't think they matter in terms of poll numbers. Poll boosts from State of the Unions are temporary things. But they do set agendas. They do give us a window into what will the president be pushing for and what is getting left off the table. I think the last is really more important here. I mean, some things can get passed by staying under the radar. So it's not like if it doesn't get mentioned, it means there's no way, no how it gets passed. But for example, all the indications are that public option is not part of the American family's plan. There's other healthcare things, but not public option. You're not sneaking public option under the radar. Like if Biden's not putting his shoulder into public option, we're not getting public option this year. I mean, I think it wouldn't have happened anyway for other reasons. I think it's arguably a bit of a chicken or egg thing, but I think this will put a fine point on Biden concluding these stars are not aligned. We're going to focus on other stuff. So I think there's going to be a number of things like that where we'll be able to look and say, oh, you know what? Here's the things that have a chance, and here are the things that don't have a chance.
So I may or may not write. I do have to watch it as part of my fiduciary responsibility, I guess, as a political pundit. I have to watch it. I'm not happy about it. But it's one of those things you have to do. I was told that with Biden, we wouldn't have to be so focused on things like this. I don't expect to learn much. I think I kind of know what Biden's going to be now after 100 days or so of this.
You've turned kind of negative on Biden. You've had a very harsh column this week.
Yeah. I mean, Biden is still obviously much more decent and sane than Donald Trump, but again, I think we were sold that he was going to be this centrist, moderate guy who worked across the aisle. And he certainly temperamentally is presenting that. Everybody's now on the boring, noticing that he's sort of running up the score by virtue of not calling attention to himself and not seeming radical. He's got a radical agenda by virtue of not being radical. But it's also the kind of radical agenda that the Republicans don't even care about anymore, right? Because it's not, every time Republicans try to find some culture war thing having to do with, Kamala Harris's books or cheeseburgers or whatever, it doesn't really pan out. But meanwhile, Biden is spending trillions and trillions of dollars, which is huge.
Well, look, Biden has proposed spending trillions and trillions of dollars.
Well, he's already spent $2 trillion.
There were a few trillion before Biden too.
A trillion here and a trillion there, and pretty soon, the rest. But
the thing about the trillion that got spent, the 1.9 trillion, some of that money's going to come back. it's going to get recirculated into the economy and come back, in taxes. So we'll see.
You could say that about any government, like stimulus, couldn't you? I mean, if that's the theory, is that we're going to give people money and they're going to buy stuff with it as long as they don't,
Well, in Keynesian logic, if there's a gap, if you have an output gap, because you're in a crisis of some sort, that money's going to fill that gap, and so you're not going to spend yourself into oblivion because you're basically keeping people up off of the mat. The question then becomes, when do you stop being Keynesian, or at least reducing your degree of Keynesianness? And we have some Democratic senators, most prominently Joe Manchin, saying we got to start paying for things now. And so, the Biden spending plan here, I believe he's saying that it's all paid for. Now, he's paying for it with taxes on the wealthy and corporations. And that's going to be a non-starter for Republicans. And it's not even fully embraced by Joe Manchin. He thinks that.
Right. And there is some drama out there. What does Joe Manchin do? And that's an interesting. We'll have to see how that plays out. But that's not going to be answered in a State of the Union. What will be answered is what you were saying, how we can sort of divine what Biden is focused on. And I kind of feel like after the press conference I had to watch and the 100-day, I mean, I kind of think I know what he's up to.
Well, there's been a lot of previewing, so I do think we have a fairly good sense. But you don't know until you know. This will put a fine point on things once we hear it laid out.
Yeah.
And there should be some tea leaf reading on the question of bipartisanship. How much is he going to lean into? I'm ready to work with you to find a compromise for these things. Or is there going to be a mix, to go back to Corn Pop, is he going to whip out the chain? Is he going to say, hey, if you're not on board, I'm ready to go reconciliation? What's that mix of rhetoric tonight?
That'll be interesting. I'll be surprised. I mean, if he does really play up bipartisanship, I will be surprised because basically Joe Biden has really tried to redefine language. Everything is infrastructure. Everything that's not infrastructure is Jim Crow 2.0. And then bipartisanship is actually not working across. It turns out, I didn't know, but it's actually not working with members of the other party who are elected. Bipartisanship is if Republican voters currently approve of something, that's bipartisanship. So, as of now, Joe Biden has redefined what bipartisanship means.
Well, the thing about that talking point, that talking point, I'd say works so long as you have passed a bill and signed it into law that yields those kinds of poll numbers. He doesn't have another law yet to say that about.
Yeah.
So we have this degree of uncertainty what Biden will be able to do with 50 Democrats going forward. Joe Manchin is still being a holdout. Other Democrats are signaling they're not fully on board with everything Biden has proposed out of the gate. So there's a story in Axios yesterday that the White House is taking the Republican infrastructure offer seriously, engaging in a degree of informal talks. Roger Wicker was on record saying this is a good start, and saying if they had the votes, this is not verbatim. If they had the votes, they would roll us. I don't think they have the votes. So, that's part of the dance here. Again, I don't think it's impossible that Republicans are too recalcitrant and they can't find the middle ground, and then Biden pulls the plug, or perhaps Joe Manchin pulls the plug and they go that route. But that's not today. And Biden can't know that that day will come. So that's why I think it's a bit of an uncertainty. To what extent where's he going to raise the expectations on? Is he going to raise the expectations on getting the bipartisan deal? Or is he going to raise the expectations on, I know I can do this without you one way or the other?
Well, okay. I mean, if recent history is a predictor, it's the latter, right? It's Biden is not going to say screw you, but he's going to basically act as if he doesn't need them and he doesn't care. And again, I think it will be newsworthy and interesting if he surprises me and he does shift back toward wanting bipartisanship in the sense of trying to win Republican votes on something. That will surprise me. I do want to say we finally killed, I hope we killed the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
No, you're no fun.
I hope it doesn't come back. It's been gone for 2 years now.
Have you ever gone?
Oh yeah. Well, I've never actually been to the dinner.
You've been to the side parties.
Yeah. You can go. Well, sometimes I was invited and sometimes I just showed up. But Bill, I found that if you wear a pilot's uniform and have enough confidence, you can pretty much walk into any room you want to go into.
I appreciate the 30 Rock reference.
If you wear a tuxedo.
I did that once with a friend, by the way. I went on a road trip with a friend of mine when I was in my early 20s. And when our first stop was Cleveland, we were going to go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And we get there and it's closed for a private party for the National Conference of Mayors. And, we weren't dressed for anything. But my friend was like, let's just go in. We just waltzed in and got to hang out with the mayors and have a fairly private tour of the museum. It was fantastic. You can walk in a lot of places with confidence.
Totally. It's all about selling it. When my dad was like in the Army Reserves and National Guard or something, he found that if you didn't have anything to do, they would make you do something. So he pulled like a Costanza. He would just walk around with a clipboard checking stuff off. And like he never had to do anything. It was great. But I've been to, in fact, one year I got to hang out with Charlie Wilson, who's now dead, the former congressman from
Charlie Wilson's War.
That was cool. And this was like a year after the movie came out.
Wow. So you know why it was cool? Because it's fun. The White House Correspondents' Dinner is fun. Why can't people have a little bit of fun if you work in politics?
Wait, I'll tell you what's fun. Being left alone. Being with my family, like coaching my little league team.
You don't have to go. No one's forcing you.
I have to cover these things. It's part of my job. There will be like one year the Daily Beast had a cocktail party, an awesome cocktail party on the roof of our office building, which was amazing. It was great. But you got to go to these things. You know what I mean? Like you have to make an appearance.
You know what? Everyone in D.C., you have this total cognitive dissonance. We have people saying, oh, why can't it be like the old days? Why can't things be bipartisan? Why can't we have a little brandy after work? We don't do stuff to get along anymore. And then you have one thing left where people actually have a little bit of fun. And people inside Washington, particularly amongst journalists, this is disgusting that we're having a drink next to a politician. We should be covering how awful this is. This is an abomination. This is making the whole profession look bad. We look like we're in the tank. We can't have anyone see us laughing at a joke by a comedian while I'm sitting at a dinner table with a politician. Heaven forbid people have a little bit of enjoyment in their work lives. And because you make politics have to be so sterilized, you can't have the social interaction that would make actually working across the aisle be a lot easier. It is certainly possible for a journalist to go to a social occasion and then do their jobs properly the next day. The two things are not incompatible.
I'm not interested in access. And really, what I like to do, I sort of almost view what I do as like being a movie critic. I criticize a lot, which is weird because I'm actually temperamentally a pretty nice guy. But I don't really want to know them that much. I mean, and you know what? Usually when I have, spent time with politicians, it's just confirmed my gut instinct. It's demonstrated to me that I kind of was right. Because I've been to, obviously I've spent time around them off and off the record, but it's just confirmed my gut. But like, it's easier for me to write mean things about them if I don't hang out with them. But back to the State of the Union or whatever we're calling this. this doesn't need to be a speech. Didn't Thomas Jefferson write a letter and send it over?
It was Wilson that made speaking at the Congress a baseline thing. I try to remember if everybody after him did it, or maybe there was a few hiccups afterwards. But he basically set the precedent. There might have been a couple of examples before, but generally speaking, you're right that it was done in writing. Forgive me if I'm not 100% accurate on all the particulars here, but I know Wilson is really the pivot point with it.
And by the way, since we're talking history real quick, I listened to your podcast, Bill.
The interview that I did?
My history can beat up your politics.
Right, so I did an interview on My History Can Beat Up Your Politics, which was plugging my own When America Worked podcast. So you enjoyed that?
It was a podcast about a podcast, and I thought it was really good. I really liked it. And here's something I didn't know, Bill. Even though I had listened to your podcast, it didn't hit me. I don't know if you didn't. Maybe it just never hit me. But Stettinius was a heartbeat away from the presidency.
I'm sorry, my cat is clawing me and tugging at my cables. You said Stettinius was in the line of succession. You didn't know that?
Not just in the line of succession. He was a heartbeat away from the president.
He was a heartbeat away.
If Harry Truman dropped dead early on, he would have been president.
Yeah, that's right.
That's amazing.
And that was a reason why Truman didn't want to keep him around. Because Truman thought, well, if you're going to be in the line of succession, you should have some experience in elective office. And so even though, literally the day after Truman is sworn in as president, he's talking to Jimmy Burns, who was, I forget what elective office he held. Might have been a governor. But he was a Supreme Court justice. He was heading up the Office of War Mobilization under FDR. So he had a lot of lines on his resume. And Truman basically said that he wanted to be Secretary of State, but he wasn't going to do the offer just yet, while the UN conference in San Francisco was happening that Stettinius was going to run point on. But, people talk, and so the rumor gets out, and it's kind of hanging over Stettinius' head. And the media know that his days are numbered. And so Stettinius never got a lot of deference and respect, even as he was pulling off one of the most significant diplomatic achievements in world history. And then right when he finishes is when Truman sends an emissary to basically tell him, "Yeah, I'm gonna fire you." And they try to shortcut out. "I'm gonna make you ambassador to the UN. That's gonna be awesome. Everyone loves it. Ambassador to the UN. It's gonna be the greatest job," which of course it is not. But that was the fact that he was in the line of succession was a contributing factor to that series of events.
Yeah, well, check out that. I would recommend that podcast. It was very good.
And if you haven't listened to that podcast in general, My History Can Be Your Politics, it's a good podcast. Period. It's been doing it for a long, long time.
When are we getting another edition of your podcast?
Well, I'll tell you something, Matt. Today is the day that there is no more remote school in my household.
Have you popped the cork on the champagne yet?
I might play a little hooky with my spouse this afternoon in celebration for
nice.
like an hour of hooky, which for me would be like your lunch break, but for me it'll feel like hooky. So I am very hopeful it's going to free up some time in my day to really get the second installment of When America Worked done.
Love it. So you've been. I know we're on a short day today, but what have you been writing about? What's up?
Well, I got a piece up at the Monthly this morning about gerrymandering. So I don't know if you saw it, Matt. The census came out with reapportionment.
Yes, West Virginia's losing a congressman.
I know. Who's going to? This is a state we got 3 Republicans, and now someone's going to get lumped into someone else's district. You're going to have some kind of knife fight. Who survives? And that is part of the story here. That Democrats have been in a panic. They're in a panic about gerrymandering, and they're in a panic about the Electoral College. That the general shift of the country has been votes away from the Northeast towards the Sun Belt, and this is gonna hurt New York, this is gonna hurt Illinois, and it's gonna help the redder states like Texas, and that's gonna further exacerbate the institutional disadvantages that Democrats have. And I mean, there is a shift from Rust Belt to West and South, but it's not just blue states to red states. West Virginia loses a seat. Ohio loses a seat. Colorado gains. Oregon gains. And even the states that are reddish that gain a seat, Florida, Texas, North Carolina, these are states which are red now, but it may not be red tomorrow. Because that population shift is bringing bluer voters into redder areas. And that's all relevant as far as electoral college number crunching is concerned. When you get down to the House level, the House seat changes. Sure, New York's losing a seat, but Democrats run the process there, though it's sort of quasi. There's an independent commission, but Democrats can overrule it. So if Democrats want to be aggressive, they can take out that lost seat on the Republicans. Doesn't mean Democrats are going to lose the seat. And that's also true for Illinois. Whereas now it's certainly possible that Republicans are going to net gain here. There's some other quirks. For example, Oregon gains a seat, but it's already a heavily Democratic delegation. And the state legislature, the Democrats there, just kind of deal with the Republicans who are being very obstructionist in the legislature. They said, okay, if we give you equal representation on the redistricting commission, will you stop blocking our legislation? They agreed to that. And already the map is such that it was hard to squeeze on a Democratic seat anyway. So good chance Republicans get a seat there. Montana gets a seat. It's currently an at-large state, only one congressperson. So they get two. They have an independent commission that is half Republican, half Democrat, but with a chair, so they have an odd number total. The chair is either appointed by the other commissioners, if they can agree, and if they can't agree, it's the state Supreme Court. They couldn't agree. The state Supreme Court appointed a woman with a 25-year history in tribal law. She's a prosecutor for two of the tribes. She's been a tribal law judge. She's worked with the ACLU of Montana's Racial Justice Project. And the Republicans are like, this is a partisan. How dare you put a partisan over the chair? And she's like, oh, I don't really do parties. I do causes, which I'm sure is a line that's not going to put Republicans at ease at all. So it will be at least a competitive seat at that level. So
I heard, Bill, I saw something on Twitter, so it's true, that like if New York, if they could have found like 80 more voters,
89,
and they would have had an extra congressman. Did you see that?
Oh, I did see that. It's true, but again, it's good for Democrats that they didn't, and it's bad for Republicans that. It seemingly, and maybe there's some more research that I'm not aware of, but from what I understanding is that they might have undercounted Latinos in Texas and Florida, which, at least as of today, are reddish, and Republicans control the processes there. If Trump took the project of counting Latinos more seriously, they would have gotten perhaps more Congress people in those states and taken a bigger chunk out of other states. So it's not all bad news for Democrats. When you look at, so Dave Wasserman at the Cook Political Report and Sean Trendy at Real Clear Politics, they did, you don't have to lose a seat or gain a seat to redraw your lines. Everybody can redraw their lines. So Wasserman and Trendy basically went down all the states and did an estimate of what they think is going to happen. They can't know exactly for sure, but they're both estimating around a 4-seat gain for Republicans based on gerrymandering, which is not nothing. But they need to get 5 to take back the House. And chances are it's not going to be an all things equal election where nothing changes and only gerrymandering changes the composition of the House. People will be high or low on Biden and the Democrats by November 2022, and that's going to probably be a bigger factor. I mean, if it is a very narrow election, maybe these handful of seats make the difference. But
these seats will be created by 2022. Is that?
Well, that's a bit of normally, yes, but because the census process is so late, it may be that the state redistricting processes are delayed and they can't get the new districts drawn in time for this election. And on top of that, there's litigation. If some states try to do an aggressive gerrymander and it gets litigated, do the courts say, I'm going to put a stay on this? We're not going to do it yet. We'll wait till the next election for it. So there's that uncertainty too. I didn't get into that in my own piece, but there is that complication. If Republicans go as aggressive as they possibly can, Wasserman thinks that maybe they could squeeze out 8 net seats. But if you do that, you're taking a risk. To be aggressive means you're spreading your vote more thinly.
Right.
Which means you might get burned later on. So you look at the last decade. Republicans take the House in the Tea Party year of 2010. That's before gerrymandering. They win the House with a net gain of 63 seats before gerrymandering. They do a gerrymandering project in 2012 after the census. And at the time, because then that 2012 election, Democrats had more votes for the House, and Republicans got more seats. So Democrats went ballistic. Gerrymandering is the scourge of the nation. It's deprived us of a majority we deserved. But no other election after that replicated that outcome. And by 2018, Democrats take the House themselves. If you combine their net gains in 2016 and 2018, they net gained 47 seats out of that, most of it in 2018. Largely on the same map. There were a few places where litigation undid a Republican gerrymander, but by 2018 that was 4 seats, not 47 seats. That's not how they got the House back. And not only did they get the House back, the share of seats that they got is basically the same as the share of votes that they got, and that was replicated again in 2020. So 2012 was a quirk, and the lines that Republicans drew did not hold for them. People moved around. Redder places got bluer. People didn't like Donald Trump and changed their mind about voting for Republicans. The lines are not these fireproof walls. And so the more thinly you spread, the more you risk you are when that wave eventually comes that's going to drown you. Republicans might say in these states, you know what? I don't even know where this vote's going to go. I don't know who's going to move where. I don't know if a Republican vote for Trump in 2020 is a Republican vote for the House or for president in 2022 or 2024 because Trump's such a weird anomaly in our politics. Maybe the safer thing for me as a Republican to do is to protect my incumbents and pad their districts with reliable Republican voters and leave the Democratic seats alone and try to keep what we have and see if we can just win back. 2022, midterm, not go for president's party, we can get back 5 seats on that alone. We don't have to play with the lines to get there, and we might get burned down the line if we get too cute.
Or at least don't get too greedy. Maybe take a couple seats. But not 8.
You can probably get to 3 or 4 without going crazy, without getting all that weird with the lines, and which is why that's a pretty safe assumption that's going to happen. And it's a narrow enough majority where it's very positive which will lose the House in 2022, gerrymandering or not, because it's so narrow and it's an out year for Democrats. But this notion that democracy is broken because of gerrymandering. And Democrats will never get a fair shake because of gerrymandering. That hasn't proved to be true, and the census numbers further suggest that it's not going to be the case in the short run.
So my take would be that I think it's amazing that Republicans are probably going to take the House back. If you consider how crazy the Republican Party is, how insane they are, mostly, there's 15 of them that aren't, but the Republican Party is insane. And the fact that they're probably going to take back the House really shows you, I think, 2 things. One would be, I don't think Democrats are doing what they could be doing to like seize on this moment and capitalize on this moment where the Republican Party has disqualified.
Well, why assume that? I mean, it could well be as narrow as things are, and in a normal set of circumstances, you might give Republicans the edge for taking back the House, and they may well. But if they nominate a whole bunch of crazy people, they may give away seats they should be winning. I mean, why did they do badly in 2020? Because a lot of right-leaning voters were sick and tired of Trumpiness and went the other way. That could extend into 2022 if Biden is still seen as the sane, rational one, and Republicans get crazier and crazier.
Well, but this brings me to my second point, which is like Republicans, almost took the House and barely lost the Senate. I mean, if it wasn't for Trump going down to Georgia and sabotaging, they might have, they very well might have, Republicans might have maintained the Senate. So like, it could just be that the voter, that a lot of voters don't care that Republicans are crazy as well. Anyway, I find it surprising that Republicans are like, we're crazy and we don't care and we're not going to do anything to try to fix that or mitigate it. We're just going to fly our freak flag. And they're still probably going to take back the House.
Well, if they didn't, if Republicans let the freak flag fly and they don't take back the House, I bet you the average Republican assumes they will take back the House, as many Democrats assume too.
Yeah.
That's probably conventional wisdom. If they don't, and it's clearly attributable to nominating crazy people in seats that they should have won, what kind of reckoning does that cause inside the Republican Party? It's because it's now not just about Trump anymore. It's about what's happening to the party down the line.
I think it would be so. I don't think it changes sadly, I don't think it changes the trajectory. I think what it is, I think it's like 2014. Am I correct? Was it 2014, the year where Republicans kind of got their shit together?
They took the Senate. Wait, because 2013 you had the shutdown, you had the Ted Cruz shutdown, okay, which pulled very badly for them. I think you and I have had this debate before. There are certain people that said, "Oh, the shutdown worked because they won the Senate in 2014." I'm like, no, they stopped doing shutdowns.
Yeah, and then it was like a full year went by before there was an election. But whatever the case may be, there was at some point where Republicans kind of got their act together for the holidays, for the election, and they did okay. They did well, but it didn't last. 2 years later, they nominated Donald Trump, right? And so I suspect that if all you do, if the punishment is merely we thought we were going to take back the House, but we didn't, that yes, it causes them to clean up their act a little bit, but it doesn't change the general drift.
What would also complicate the post-election analysis in that circumstance is we don't know how bipartisan Biden will get or will be able to do. Let's say Biden gets a $750 billion infrastructure bill with the help of 10 Republican senators. And then, Trumpy Republicans get apoplectic that, they did this dance with the devil. They are more motivated to nominate crazy people who are going to burn everything to the ground. They lose the House. Democrats keep the House and the Senate. And who gets the blame then? You'll have certain established Republicans saying it's because you nominated a bunch of crazy people. And you have the crazy people saying, well, it's because you guys gave Biden all these victories.
Yeah. What Republicans are really missing is the clean example of, if you touch the stove, you're going to get burned. Don't touch the stove. There is, if Trump had lost in 2016, then I think it's possible that there could have been, that the Republicans could have been chastened. But they've been rewarded oftentimes for bad behavior. And when they are punished, it's sort of infrequent enough that it doesn't I think the Bill Scher theory is you have to lose 3 straight presidential elections.
Yes.
Before you get the memo. Mm-hmm. Well, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
It's intermittent. Their lessons are intermittent. And so that it hasn't been enough to clearly demonstrate the problem.
If Republicans lose the House in 2018, lose the White House and Senate in 2020, can't get anything back in 2022, it's not 3 presidentials, but it's 3 elections where they've been underperforming to expectations. And I think it would at least elevate some voices saying, hey, people, this is not sustainable for our party. And so if we're a Democrat, I mean, to go back to the gerrymandering thing, I'm
sorry, just let me put a pin in it real quick.
Sure.
Here's why this goes to why I couldn't and didn't vote for Biden.
In the general.
If that happened and the Democrat response was, aha, the Republicans have demonstrated they cannot be taken seriously as a party. We are going to become America's party. We are going to basically screw them over by occupying the center, by becoming a mainstream middle America party. We're going to make them obsolete and irrelevant while they're down. That would be brilliant, and it would also probably be healthy. Instead, the interpretation from Democrats is, aha, the Republicans are on their heels. Let's run up the score. Let's do every radical left-wing progressive thing possible because they can't stop us. And there's no reward for bipartisanship. There's no reward for centrism. In fact, if we don't fully implement all of our plans right now, not only are we going to lose our base, but we're not going to be able to demonstrate that our plans work because it's like half measures from Breaking Bad or whatever. That is the lesson. And Obama did this, Trump did this, and now, kind of to my surprise a little bit, Biden is doing it. There is no effort to outflank the other side and seize the middle ground. We have a moment of time when we can run up the score, damn the torpedoes.
Well, we don't know if there's going to be a pivot to the center with Biden yet. I mean, I grant you that wasn't what you articulated definitely informed the approach to the relief plan, and certainly informs the approach that many Democrats have been taking in terms of trying to pass a lot of wish list items through the House, bring them to the Senate floor, provoke the filibusters, have those confrontations. But let's keep in mind, those bills have not been put on the Senate floor. Schumer has hesitated from forcing those confrontations. There are people talking about taking H.R. 1 for the People Act, the voting reform bill, putting that straight to the floor, having a massive filibuster, and then using that agitation to lean on Manchin and Sinema to eliminate the filibuster. And Manchin said flat out, that ain't going to work on me. And since he said that, there's been almost no talk about bringing that bill to the floor. Now, so to go back to the gerrymandering point, I think Democrats should internalize that this is not the voting laws. I mean, we've talked about voting laws in the past too. Voting laws, gerrymandering, these are not existential threats to the Democratic Party. I mean, there's plenty of things that have, independent redistricting has merit on its own accord. Vote by mail, early voting, these all have their own merits. But Democrats should not think, I have to do this. I have to move heaven and earth through this or else we're going to lose in a year's time. That's not the case. The bigger question is, how will people be doing economically, which is obviously tied to the pandemic? That's the biggest thing. If you want to move heaven and earth, move heaven and earth on that. And you can be chill about voting reform for the short run. Because if you're pushing on that front, it can be characterized as partisan power grabbing, which is not what the average voter thinks is putting their interest at heart. And that might lead to what you're talking about, people think Democrats are having a moment of overreach and excess. Now, again, I think Biden has been very good at trying to stay focused on what the average person wants, which is why his poll numbers are still pretty decent, still mid-50s. And what I'm saying here doesn't automatically answer the debate, resolve the debate. Do you go as big as possible with Democrats vote only, or do you meet Republicans halfway so you're getting something done and moving the ball forward? I would, and I think that question is going to end up being answered by the Joe Manchins of the Senate, who are going to say, you don't have a choice here. You have to do this in a bipartisan fashion because you don't have my vote for 50, or them saying, okay, Republicans are a lost cause. Let's do what we can ourselves. But that jury's out. I grant you that there's a lot of energy towards the partisan side of that question, but it's not a given that Biden's going to end up there.
But I don't think that question is going to be answered during the, what do we call the State of the Union? The joint address to Congress.
I don't think it's going to be answered. Congress. It's not going to be answered, but we might get more information.
If he makes real overtures toward bipartisanship, and I seriously doubt it.
I mean, he's not going to put a concession on the table during the speech. You can't expect that. But how
will there be? Bill, it's not a real State of the Union. Will he have people, regular people, in the audience that he talks about?
I mean, the audience was going to be constricted. It's not going to be a full Congress.
Is this like a Zoom call, or what is this going to be?
I think it's going to be like the Golden Globes and the Oscar thing. We got little tables or whatnot.
I mean, is this actually going to be in the Congress?
I think it's going to be in the Congress, but I think it's going to. I know not everybody's going. People are going to be spaced out, and I don't know if regular people get to go or not. But my question is,
I was going to bring Charles Johnson, but I guess not.
How many red lines does Biden have? I mean, so far, Biden has not put a lot of red lines on the infrastructure bill. He's not said it has to be a certain price tag. He's not said that this piece or that piece have to be in there. The only thing he said is that he won't tax people under $400,000. That's the one thing. And even Mitt Romney has tried to argue, well, you could raise the gas tax, or you could have a vehicle mileage tax, because that's really a user fee, and you don't have to treat that like taxing people under $400,000. So that's a semantic debate. I don't know if Biden's going to rule that out here tonight. That to me is the question. I mean, clearly, it's going to be hard for Republicans to undo the Trump tax reform, because that's theirs. That's their thing. So having a whole bunch of corporate tax increases and taxing the wealthy that go right at the changes in the 2017 Trump tax reform, that's a hard ask for Republicans to get them to accept. If Biden says you have to raise the corporate income tax to 28%, that makes it harder to get a deal done. If he's not putting those non-negotiables on the table, then it's easier to get a deal done. So that's the kind of thing I think you want to look for.
Or he could raise it a couple points, but not, and then you still got something. You still,
we went from 35 to 21 in the Trump bill. If you go up to 22, 23, 24, 25, manage to 25, you might be getting the Republican to accept that.
That's what I'm saying.
But clearly they won't take 28.
Like it was a waste of, whatever. You still get the accomplishment. I mean, anyway, Bill, you and I we could hash this out over dinner, but
if we got invited to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, we could work all this out, during the appetizers.
Totally. Let's see. You want to plug some stuff?
Well, I know our audience likes the history stuff, so I have a piece about Real Clear Politics, which is a bit of a dicey piece to write. But on Margaret Sanger and the head of Planned Parenthood saying we're no longer going to defend Sanger and against charges of racism. And she wrote an op-ed in the New York Times to that effect saying we can't know what was in her heart, but she met with the KKK. She had the trials for the pill in Puerto Rico, did not properly inform the participants of the dangerous side effects, and I know I'm missing one other thing, but I'll remember it. you look at the record of Margaret Sanger. She endorsed the Supreme Court ruling in Buck v. Bell, which allowed for involuntary sterilizations of people who were considered quote unquote feeble-minded or imbeciles. These are words actually in the Supreme Court opinion by Oliver Wendell Holmes. She endorsed that ruling. And so what I think is hard for people to get their heads around is Sanger supported eugenics, which a whole lot of people did in the 1920s.
All the progressives.
Progressives, conservatives, racists, non-racists. There's all eugenics was, there's a historian, Thomas Leonard, to write, eugenics was not considered pseudoscience in the 1920s. It was considered science. People accepted it as there was no, lobby for people who were developmentally disabled to prevent them from getting involuntarily sterilized.
Yeah.
You had an 8-1 Supreme Court ruling saying you should involuntarily sterilize these people. And it led to about 60, 70,000 involuntary sterilizations. Where people today, we automatically conflate eugenics with racism. And there certainly were racist eugenicists, no question. But not everybody who was a eugenicist was a racist. And Margaret Sanger was one of those people. You had W.E.B. Du Bois, who wrote for Sanger's birth control review, saying that the mass of ignorant Negroes is breeding carelessly. This was not an uncommon thing to say at that point in time in history. Sanger said flat out that that the plight of, she said Negroes at the time in the 1940s, the plight of the Negro is the same as oppressed people all over the world. We need to change white attitudes. We need to, and discrimination. We need to challenge Nazism. She talked about how Southern whites have to get over white supremacist thinking. And when she tried to provide birth control into African-American neighborhoods, like she had the Harlem Clinic, she had a 15-member all African-American advisory board. She had an African-American doctor on staff. She knew that it was not a good system to have solely white doctors providing medical care to African-Americans. She tried to do this with the so-called Negro Project in the South in the late 1930s, and she lost that battle. So there's a quote that's often circulated. It's a Clarence Thomas opinion from 2 years ago, where she says, if you're having the quote in front of me, we don't want it to be said that we're trying to exterminate the Negro population. She wasn't saying it like, ha ha ha, this is our actual plan, we don't want it to get out. She was saying, we don't want people to think something that's inaccurate about what we're doing, so let's make sure we have black doctors who are involved in the project. So now you could totally say about Margaret Sanger that she was a eugenicist, that she was an ableist. She is echoing the language of we don't want to have the feeble-minded reproducing, and she was saying before Buck v. Bell and after. And if Planned Parenthood wanted to say, look, I don't want to have us anywhere near that kind of ableist talk. We don't want to defend that. We don't want to have our name on our buildings. We want to make sure we're very clear in our online histories that she was wrong. That's where, even if it was commonplace at the time, that's not an excuse for it, and we don't want to justify it today. I get that completely, and I think that's justifiable. But you have, and I'm sure you know, Matt, that there's been a long push in pro-life advocacy to say Sanger was a racist and that abortion. Sanger was even big on abortion, mind you. Should be on birth control, not abortion. But to say that the whole project is designed to prevent African Americans from breeding, that is inaccurate. And it's in Planned Parenthood's interest to rebut that part of it. And so by saying, hey, if you go to their online history, they basically say eugenics is racism. You can't separate eugenics from racism. Therefore, she abetted these people. She went to the KKK. I should mention this whole KKK thing. She got invited to go to meet with the KKK. Sometimes you see false photos on the internet where she looks like she's at a rally, like at a cross burning, which those are doctored photographs. It's not what happened. She was invited to go. Her attitude was, you go where you're invited to go. You speak to everybody. And I want to spread the gospel of birth control. Not I want to spread the gospel of white supremacy. Now, you can falter for a judgment on that. You can say, you know what? And as the head of Planned Parenthood said in the op-ed, like, go into the KKK devalues people of color. That's a fair point. I don't think that negates everything else she did to try to help African Americans. And her stated reason for birth control in the African community is to improve the health of the entire community, to lower infant mortality rates and maternity fatalities and that sort of thing. So her mindset was very progressive for the time, and she acted on it. So the fact that she made one error in judgment going to see the KKK at a time the KKK was pretty widespread, that to me doesn't make Margaret Sanger a racist, and you shouldn't allow that kind of labeling to legitimize false characterizations of her work. And it just required us having, I mean, we should know the history. We should know that eugenicism was that widespread, not to excuse it, but to understand what the hell was going on in our country in the early 20th century.
All right. You got to bail. So let me just plug a couple quick things. The podcast, Matt Lewis and the News podcast. So I just interviewed Karen Tumulty about the triumph of Nancy Reagan. Her new book, that is out. I interviewed Bruce Mellman, who puts together these really cool infographic slideshows every quarter. The latest one's about woke capitalism. That'll be coming out. And then later on today, I'm talking to Jonathan Taplin. This is an interesting cat. He's now like a professor, and he writes about technology. But he was the road manager for Bob Dylan and the band. And then he was involved with the Rolling Stones, the Exile on Main Street, putting together the cover art of that. And then he financed Martin Scorsese's Mean Streets. And he has a new memoir out called The Magic Years about that time. So a little bit of something for everybody there, Bill.
Definitely check that out. Check out the My History Can Beat Up Your Politics podcast that I'm on. Another monthly piece this week about the carbon tax, how the politics of the carbon tax have gotten all twisted around. So do check that out. And I guess maybe both of us will have some post joint address takes for you for your pleasure tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and even if we don't have columns, Bill, we can do a DM Zoom and talk about, what we saw at the revolution on our Zoom chat weekly, which you can be a part of if you give us money. Patreon.com/Bill Scher or /Matt Lewis.
Excellent.
Be a part of history.
Well, I'll see you on Friday in the Zoom, and I'll see you back here next week in the DMZ.
All right. See you guys.